It's a pleasure to be here, and I promise to not stand in the way of either dinner or Shibani Kashyap. I'm going to make this really brief. But first of all, thank you to the Jaipuria family. I'm privileged to have known Mr. Shishir Jaipuria's father, who I knew at the time of the Swadeshi crisis, and it's thanks to the persuasion of my friend Partho, who insisted I should be here. I had a long and prepared text, but I'm going to skip that because I think you've heard enough speeches and enough promises of being brief. So, but I guess one's got to do a bit of duty since I've been asked to give you a special address. So I'm going to speak on a subject which I think a lot of you are dealing with and are probably finding it a bit of a mystery. And the subject I've chosen to speak to you on is on the marketplace that all of you are actually working in towards. And that is the marketplace which is now known as the marketplace of millennials. Millennials are a new generation which is fairly difficult to understand. They are the generation which has been born into a life of reasonable plenty, take a lot of things for granted, and I think that are going to be the kind of people that many of you will either manage, work with, sell to, or God forbid, be managed by. The fact is that this generation was born into a world which has changed from the time that the school began in Kanpur, from the time that the management institutes started, and it's a time when the world is reaching an inflection point. When I was listening to stories of the size of the Alumni Association here, I was just thinking to myself that I hope that too many of you don't have batches on WhatsApp groups, because it's the most horrific experience, because I am on 3 or 4 of my school batches, college batches, university batches and things like that, and it just carries on endlessly. You can never get off your WhatsApp because it's such a flow of usually regurgitated jokes, very little personal information, and largely forwards and mainly irritating good mornings and good evenings. Right or wrong? How many of you agree? So I'm glad that you've got a portal that at least you can shut it off when the machine shuts off. Just don't have it on your phone. The reason I'm saying that is that the millennial generation actually lives on this medium. The millennial generation does not read any of the media that we are used to. They don't even watch television. Everything that's in their lives is usually on this handset of theirs. That's where they live. It's a generation born into a situation of comfort, largely of plenty, but it's also a generation which is extremely insecure. Why are they insecure? Because this is probably the first generation that is not going to have, and I'm repeating, not going to have the same living standards across many parts of the world that the previous generation enjoyed. Many of them will find homes too expensive. Many of them will find colleges far too expensive. Many of them will find personal owned vehicles far too expensive. This is the new generation. And you must understand that some of this generation recognizes this already. So the implication of that is that they are living in a world of the shared economy. Everything is changing. Can you imagine what would happen to the Jaipuria institutes, for example, if all education went online? Think of it. Can you imagine how many industries have suddenly gone into the sunset which you thought would last forever? It's a generation which is actually going to see some of those changes actually happen. Because it will happen to them, they are also notoriously fickle, notoriously lack the kind of connections, real world connections, which many of you sitting around your tables are able to enjoy. And this creates an interesting situation for those either managing them because they don't recognize the same bonds of loyalty that you did. They don't recognize the same necessity and can't enjoy the same warmth that many of us did. And yet they feel that they have multiple lives. They live on a planet which is layered in many ways. They can connect instantly with cities which you haven't thought of, and they're constantly on. They never have their phones off. Even when it's charging, they're watching it with one eye. And it's a generation that recognizes that even the huge changes that they are today facing are nothing compared to the changes that they should expect. Imagine a world where manufacturing is largely done by robots. Imagine a world where a lot of what the transactions you currently do are done by artificially intelligent servers. What will people do? That's a question that some of them are already facing. Some of them are pondering. And if you want to teach, reach, or work, or sell to this, you have to recognize that this is the new generation of millennials. Understand them and know that they will be your overlords at some point of time. Simply because many of them will have technological advantages which many of us are reluctant to actually accept. So I'm going to stop here rather than go on for too much longer, because I can see that everybody is desperately hungry and hoping that the evening comes to a close. So just leave you with 5 thoughts that I want to leave with you. This generation of millennials has a need, and that first need is recognize me. The second need you might think is common to all generations. It is not, because of some things that some of the alumni speakers spoke about. Treat me as an individual. They don't want to be seen as a group. The third thing about every product they buy, every course they conduct, every school they go to is make it easy for me. I'm already suffering from overload. Everyone wants it easy. The fourth thing that they want is anticipate my needs. I'm not going to tell you what I need. You've got to anticipate what I want and provide that for me. Otherwise, I'm going to be bored and I'm going to disconnect from you. And the last thing they want, which is common to all generations, is give me a voice. So if one looks at this generation that's coming into the marketplace today, which has the incomes, largely parental incomes and not all necessarily their own incomes, it's a generation which is living at home for many more years than any previous generation did. It is a generation that is going to determine how the world is going to face the issues of environment, of poverty, and of inequality. And it's a generation that all of you need to begin to understand. So I'll stop here and thank you very much for paying attention for so long.
Would request